There we go. On cue.
Okay. So thank you, Rodney W. Jacobs Jr., right, for joining me on the transcript and accepting the invitation to come on. And I wanted to start off by having really essential conversations with people I felt could add constructively to that conversation about the future of Miami, the president of Miami, and all things surrounding Miami. So I thought I'd have a conversation with you because you seem like such a knowledgeable individual. You're everywhere. You've been highlighted and like profiled quite extensively by Voyage MIA. You were like on you were just on, I think, This Week in South Florida, which was a wonderful, extensive interview too. And you've been doing the work now in South Florida, in Miami, particularly for about 2 years, right? Or three?
Around three, a little bit over three at this point.
That's right. So tell me about yourself, Rodney Jacobs.
Yeah, so just a little bit about me. Went to undergrad law school in Ohio. After I graduated law school, I joined the Army, so I'm a reserve officer in the United States Army. After that, I came to Miami to work in the current capacity that I am now, and also to finish my master's degrees at the University of Miami. So, in the capacity that I work in now, me in a small but mighty team, we work to do oversight of the City of Miami Police Department and do our best to hold officers accountable for misconduct.
Amazing. And you are a Pennsylvanian import, right? If I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
yeah. As I tell people, I'm imported talent. I'm originally from Philadelphia, but my dad was in the Army as well. So he was a 30-year active duty soldier. So I lived in a lot of places. I always tell people, fun fact, that I went to 10 different schools before I graduated high school. So Philly's hometown because that's where I was born and that's where my extended family's from. But, I've lived all around, including 4 years in high school in Tampa. So.
And you were called to Miami to fill this position by a person you had previously interned for, right?
Yes and no. So yeah, exactly. So after I got done with military training, I called one of my contacts in Ohio that I worked for. I was like, hey, I'm looking for work. Let me know if you know anything. She stumbled upon this opportunity from a colleague. That colleague is now my boss and director. So my first time to Miami was interviewing for this role. And the rest is kind of history. My director hired me right out of military training. I was around 26 then. So she often jokes that I was the riskiest thing she ever took under her wing, but also the most rewarding. So I think over the last 3.5 years working with the city of Miami, we've really helped innovate a department in ways that not a lot of other jurisdictions have seen before.
All right. So taking into consideration the national conversation that's been ignited this year regarding police reform, regarding police brutality, regarding race relations in the United States, which has always been a contentious topic, but I feel like now we're finally taking a collective breath as a nation more than ever before. Of course, not everybody's on the same page, but I think more than ever, right? We're at a moment when we're all like realizing things need to shift dramatically. You seem to be associated with some of the greatest institutions of our country, some would say, right? And my question, I guess, to you is, as a black man in America, you know, what are your thoughts? What are your opinions, your feelings, your advice on transforming systems from inside and outside, traditional and non-traditional ways?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that people need to be mindful of when you're transforming any system or institution is, really search for practical remedies in ways that give you ascertainable wins and not just being out there just looking to do the morally right thing, which I think serves its purpose. But I guess for me on an administrative level, where I'm really talking about ways of innovating departments from within, I try to search for those things that will allow us to really come together and make a practical change. Otherwise, you kind of just end up talking to yourself, and not a lot of people listen, whether that be good or bad. I like to think that we don't have much time in the day, so if I can find some wins and kind of chisel away at the power structure, that's the space that I want to fill up, because I think those little small changes over time lead to a substantial impact or a substantial change. So I think that's important to keep in mind, especially if you're an institution that is kind of entrenched or maybe in some ways the fabric or the foundation of what most people deem to be the appropriate thing, right? Anytime you're going up against a system that is kind of been entrenched with a lot of money, a lot of influence, you got to take it slow, but you also have to be very deliberate and work in opportunities as they come. I think one of the things that we really have to be happy about in this situation is action. You know, for a long time, you know, before I was alive, even people have been talking about police reform, criminal justice reform, and you know the racial underpinnings of our country. A lot more people can speak eloquently, have written dissertations about some of the same things that we're doing right now. Not because people haven't thought about it before, not because people don't have ideas that have worked in other places, but more so because the opportunity didn't present itself. So I think it's important that when opportunity access come about, people really act into that moment and lean into it, and work collaboratively with people to get there. Ultimately, I think all of us are kind of on the same team about some of these policing procedures. People don't want bad policing. People don't want misconduct. Those things shouldn't be radical ideas. In fact, I would submit that most people agree with that. It's just about how we get there. And I think that, you know, Miami and a lot of other jurisdictions are kind of leaning into this opportunity and figuring out how to do it best.
And you mentioned that, you know, scholars, you know, researchers, literary figures have been talking about these notions for a long time, and quite specifically and quite fleshed out, right? And giving suggestions. But I think another contributing factor as to why we haven't gotten where we should be, in my opinion, or where we should have gotten, is a large discrepancy in education across the country, I think, in the educational standard across the country. I think had these readings, these findings, these studies, these thoughts been part of a national curriculum, I think that things would change. So I think there's an educational component, obviously, right? Which brings us to an educational component combined with social and civic action. And responsibility, civic duties. So tell us about the Civilian Investigative Panel, the Oversight Panel here in Miami. Tell us specifics about it, details about it, how it came to be, how it functions, and how the average civilian or citizen can get a hold of you guys.
Yeah, for sure. So the City of Miami CIP started in 2001, in large part due to the McDuffie riots and other things that were happening with policing. It was created, here's some Civics 101 for you, it was created via referendum. What that really means is that a lot of people got together and said, hey, we want an initiative on the ballot to create a new department. They got enough signatures and was able to get it on the ballot. It passed overwhelmingly with over 80% of the vote. And after that charter, amendment was given. So a charter acts as the constitution to any city or municipality. And so they had a charter amendment to that. So from there needed to be an ordinance or an enacting ordinance to talk about more specifically what this panel is or what it would do. So we got the charter amendment in 2001. Thereafter, the ordinance that kind of gave the law or the foundation of the CIP. Our board is made up of 13 people, 2 people from each city district, which gives you 10. There's a police chief appointment, and then there's a appointment for, 2 appointments from the mayor. And those are at-large appointments from the mayor. They can live anywhere within the city's 5 district. After that, we have a staff of individuals that are 2 trained investigators. We have a policy analyst as well, myself and the director. We have some admin aid support help as well. Anyone can use our service. It is a free city service. Anyone can file a complaint. If you have had an interaction with the City of Miami Police Department, you can file a complaint directly in our office or online, probably online because of COVID nowadays. You can file a complaint anonymously, or you can do a complaint through a third party. We also review all of internal affairs complaints as well. So anytime that someone files a complaint with IA, once they finish their investigation, we get the closeout file and we start our own investigation from scratch, interviewing the same witnesses if necessary or new witnesses or bringing new evidence. Once that case is closed, the summation of that comes to the 13-member panel. The panel mulls over the facts and information at our meetings. And from there, they create a recommendation. That recommendation is then given to the police department for either officer discipline or some level of exoneration. So that's kind of how our process works in the investigative model in general. The other portion of it, obviously, is it's an audit function. You know, we review all departmental orders and policies. In fact, we just had a great meeting yesterday with our policy and procedure meeting that there was people that called in from Equality Florida to kind of help us flesh out the strip search policy as it relates to transgender people. So that was something that was really lacking a lot of insight from the community, and to the police department's benefit. They say, hey, we might have gotten this wrong. We don't really know. It'd be good to work with you all to figure out what the standard is and how to do it appropriately, because we want to make sure we're not offending anyone in the community. So, that's something that, our department kind of brought up to the police department that says, hey, maybe you should work with these community partners and determine what a good policy looks like when you're strip searching anyone, especially someone that's transgendered. And obviously we know how that may turn anytime someone that's transgender goes to the correctional department as well. So that's another thing to deal with the county, probably another conversation in general. But for the most part, we act as that mouthpiece for the community. And we also critique departmental orders and policies just to ensure they're up for best practices. So we audit policies and review. We do our own investigation. And obviously we're here to, give people that notion of procedural justice, that the system can be fair if we all engage within it in a productive way.
Thank you. That was thorough and good. Thank you. How does somebody get a hold of you?
So you can get a hold of me multiple ways. You can email me at rjacobs@miamigov.com. That's rjacobs with an S. You can obviously call me 305-960-4951. You can hit me up on Twitter or Instagram at rwjacobs with an S, JR. So those three ways you can get in contact with me. And, if you have an issue with City of Miami Police Department and you feel as though you need a complaint, I'll make sure you have the resources to do so.
Thank you. So relative to departments like those in Minneapolis, those in Kenosha that have come under extreme fire and that are the center of a lot of activity right now, how, in your opinion, does MDPD fare? And what are your opinions on Miami-Dade as a whole, as a county, how it's going to fare going forward into the future concerning this issue of police brutality, police reform, and civilian oversight?
Yeah, well, two things there. First and foremost, our jurisdiction is just on the city level. So it's just Miami Police Department, City of Miami. For all those that are local, it's the blue and white cop cars. MDPD is the county equivalent, and we don't have jurisdiction to investigate any of those complaints. So the county police department, they usually have the white and green cars with the yellow stripe as well. Recently, there has been a measure to pass civilian oversight for the county, and that was passed, and they're looking to build their department. But although I was a large push to get that set up and was really instrumental in writing legislation and policy, I do not work for the county oversight department. In fact, no one does as of yet. And so my suggestions wouldn't really, be thought out or thorough on how the county police department works. So I'm not going to opine on that too much. But what I can say is that, hey, oversight is always needed. I think oversight is a great vehicle to get from A to B. I don't think oversight is necessarily the answer for police reform, but it helps us gather the information, the data points. Every year we come out with an annual report here at the city that talks about, disparities within policing, that talks about body-worn camera usage. We are that hub of information that people can come to and utilize that makes the case for police reform and how things can be done and changed. So understanding that notion is why I think civilian oversight is necessary at any level of government, because it gives us that necessary tool we need to build a house. And although, as you mentioned, in Minneapolis and in Kenosha and a lot of other places around America that don't have oversight, or that may be looking to get oversight, or that maybe even have a court-appointed consent decree, there is value in having that independent party that's helping you with that reform effort. Because otherwise, you don't really have as much to build on as you would have. Having us here, having a CIP or a world with a CIP in it is much better than one without it. And I'm glad that the county saw that, and they're going to be looking to make those strides hopefully in the coming year.
Awesome. And tell us about what I understand, I think, is a unique component of this panel, which is subpoena powers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the city of Miami, as well as the county equivalent, will have the power to subpoena. Although it's somewhat unique to have subpoena powers, and I know people in the community like to talk about it, state law actually precludes us from subpoenaing police officers that are the subject of a complaint or that may have the potential to be disciplined. However, as an administrator, I don't think it's really that fruitful to subpoena officers. Typically, if you do, you end up, spending obviously legal money to get the subpoena. You bring in the officer just kinds of, goes around the bush. Like, I don't remember, I don't recall, it was so long ago. So it's really not a fruitful endeavor to subpoena officers. Where the subpoena power comes into power, in fact, more so for us, is subpoenaing documents and information, video. Even sometimes a threat of the subpoena power allows you to conduct your investigation in a more efficient and effective way. So our panel does have subpoena power. The county department does have subpoena power in that regard as well, with the exception of the county mayor commission and city or county employees. So I think it's really going to be helpful in procuring evidence for subpoena.
Awesome. So now let's move on, I guess, to more philosophy and ideology. Yeah, let's get a little abstract. The mayoral race is coming up, right? It's upon us. We know that Daniela Levine Cava and Bovo are headed off to a runoff. And you were very vocal about on your social media about your preferences and your vision. And I wanted to talk about that. So in the same thread of civic duty and capacity, the mayoral race, what are your thoughts? Who is the candidate you feel that's going to be best aligned with your values that you've tried to instill lately?
Yeah, I'm a bit, obviously, like you said, a big fan of Daniela Vicava. I think she's amazing. I think she's great. I think she's essentially what our county needs during this time. She's an innovative leader. She's very compassionate, and she listens. And as we say, I've been rocking with Daniela for well over a year now. And I think the most compelling thing that I've noticed is her ability to change. When I first started working with Daniela, really brought me to the table was her positions on the environment, climate change, sea level rise, city resiliency, or county resiliency. Those are the things that brought me to the table because I felt like they were so emergent. When we talk about climate gentrification and public transportation and why we can or may not be able to do it depending on the climate here, hurricanes, recovery, things of that nature. That's what brought me to the table with Daniela. But over the last couple of years, she's evolved so much. She's added so many ideas to her toolkit of in my opinion, are already good toolkit of information. And that kind of listening and skill set doesn't come to just anyone. She really dug into this race. She listened to people. She hosted roundtables. Before COVID, we were going to every community, a Black, brown, or wherever, and just having her listen to community members, really her taking that information in and making it a part of her platform. So that kind of evolving as a candidate, as a person, is really, really hard. So knowing that she has the ability to change is what really brought me to the table. And I say that to anyone or anything, like, your best ability is being able to change and be open. And so I know if she can have that ability, then anything that comes up against her while she's the mayor, she'll be able to overcome and do what's best for the people of this county.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, as far as, my perspective, I'm a trans individual in South Florida. I mean, none of the local administrations have really served our interests largely, I don't even think that they've even uttered the words, transgender or, sex worker or discrimination too much. I met her. I've met her a couple times, and I got to say, the veneer is like it's just not there like it is with other people. There's always this veneer when you meet somebody who's a public figure or a politician, and they've got something to sell you, before you can sort of dig deeper into who they are. And she didn't have that. She was really wonderful and genuine and warm. And then, I'm always like, whatever. I mean, politicians I don't glorify and public figures I don't glorify. I look at the policies, right? And I look at the ideas. And her ideas and policies seem so thorough, so productive. I mean, so effective. It just seems like the logical choice. For me, and I completely understand too that there's like demographic things at play here, and that folks see, either a woman's running and not a person they perceive to be as a Latino person and whatever. But I've got to say, I think she's the choice. Also, moving on to, you often cite, because I follow you on social media, and I love the things you
Bringing
do.
all my social media stuff on me.
You do. I mean, listen. This is a profiling series, right? I want to be informative, but I also want to profile you because I think it's important. There's a reason why I choose to have specific people on, and often in your social media you cite the great James Baldwin.
That was amazing. He's
I
so
know.
amazing.
And you know, James Baldwin in our community, in the LGBT community, is enormous. And of course, he's enormous to the Black community. He should be more enormous, in my opinion, for a lot of the Black community. But, you know, that's a conversation that I kind of want to have a little bit here. And that's that you, right, a cis hetero presenting man, are obviously a fan of you know, the intellect and the scholarly sort of contributions of
Mhm.
James. And tell me about that. Because for historically for so long in this country, I feel like our communities have been almost designed to be pinned against one another. And I personally feel that in the post-colonial world, the two things that have been most policed are blackness and queerness. And when those two things exist together in an individual, I think it's like the end of the road, you know?
Yeah.
So tell me.
Yeah, I mean, so in so many ways, I feel like James Baldwin's life is like a microcosm of what America could be if we just got it right. You know, the son of a Negro pastor in Harlem who grew up in other places around the world that really helped change his worldview around race and why that was important. And as you mentioned, he was also a gay Black man uh, in the Jim Crow South at points. James Baldwin he's one of those people, or one of those things where, like, to know him is to love him. But even if you don't know him, I'm sure you've heard his work somewhere, right? You know, I'm going on this. I've always loved James Baldwin, and a lot of people don't know he has written obviously numerous essays, and those essays have been then binded into different books that actually flow pretty well. So all in all his works, he has like 21 books. And you know, over the last year, you know, I've been trying my best to find all of his books, first edition, and kind of just incorporate his thoughts and his understandings into everything that I know. I've gotten down to like maybe 4 of his books at this point, and he just never ceases to amaze you with his ideas. You know, reading a Baldwin book is like going into a boxing room with a heavyweight boxing champ. Every page, every word, every sentence is like a punch to the face, and it's like, okay, this is heavy, this is deep.
Yeah, he's
So
phenomenal. And as
yeah,
I was coming up, you know, as I was, he was integrated by my one of my mentors and one of my high school teachers who was my drama teacher, and he was integrated into our curriculum pretty often. And
that's me. I mean, a lot of the books that he was written were all movie critiques as well, and in the intricacies of race within those. You know, it blows my mind why he doesn't get as much credit, even
well,
considering all the things that you know have been happening. Because I mean, listen, James was friends with a lot of people, both white and black, and those people often cite to him as well. I mean, even the great novelist now, Ta-Nehisi Coates, you know, which made him great, or at least what brought him to fame, obviously Between the World and Me, but it was also Toni Morrison's quote of saying he's the modern day James Baldwin. And so everyone's like, wait, someone's writing like Baldwin? Let me go pick up the book. Because it just doesn't happen. I don't think it's happened since. He was a once in a lifetime individual.
did you say Toni Morrison?
Yeah.
Ah, yeah, okay. I thought I heard Tori, but yeah, Tony. Well, Tony, that's a whole nother one. But yeah, and as I was coming up, I was reading Baldwin's stuff, and I was like, what a brilliant contribution, right? And I thought this should be it. This should be where the buck stops. This should be like the thing that you know black men herald as the intellectual forethinker. And then I sort of like was introduced to the world, and I'm like, why is nobody talking about this guy? Oh, you know, and so that to me hit me like a ton of bricks, because I remember being a kid and looking into my history book. It was an AP history book too, I think AP American history, and I was like, there's got to be. I mean, these are academics, you know, and academics are supposed to be impartial, and academics is supposed to be a world untouched and unscathed largely by all this political hoo-ha and all this, like, you know, really really thick prejudice. And I read through the book, and there was no mention, I don't think any mention of transgender people, perhaps one group or something, but altogether there were 2 paragraphs of LGBT history. And I was like thrown. And you know, and then I learned about, you know, Bayard Rustin, and you learn about all these people, and I'm just like, it's such a, you know, so when I see somebody like you, right, who's contributing so productively, effectively, and largely to our community here in South Florida, I say to you, thank you.
You know, some of my background's also in public health as well. So one of the big things that I've been looking at recently is intersections of policing and public health, looking at how some of the issues that we're looking at in police reform, and not only criminal justice, police reform, but criminal justice reform as well, is that a lot of these things could be and possibly are healthcare issues as well. So I think that's a big topic of conversation that people are overlooking, and hopefully I can shine a light in on that as well as the time goes.
Okay, pause that thought. This is my final thing. I'm having a lash emergency, but all right. And this is the final thing, because that's something you brought up, and we spoke about this earlier. And you had mentioned this ideology you've got, and I think it's brilliant. And I think a lot of people are subscribing to it now, the people who are smart enough to subscribe to it. And that is the perfect combination, the recipe for a better future, right? For a better society. So we're learning now, it's 2020, it's the United States of America, and I think we're finally getting on our feet and learning how to walk, in terms of like setting up a society that works through and through and doesn't punish people unnecessarily and needlessly. um, you have this ideology we talked about the combination of public policy, um, public health, and policing, right? And combining those three things to serve people as opposed to punish people. So tell me about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things in our society that we kind of categorize in its own separate pool, and we kind of keep it there and never really question it. I try to operate in the position of if it ain't broke, break it, and maybe make it better. Let's innovate it. My whole background was really trying to understand the different systems and not only understand them in a practical way, but trying to change it in a way that showed the intersection. So obviously, I went to law school, got my law degree. Both my masters are in public administration and public health, and then obviously I'm in the military as well. So when I started doing the work I did now, I saw it from so many different vantage points. I saw it from the judicial standpoint, how it would work in legal matters with case law and things like that. I saw it from the governmental standpoint using my MPA because of the public policy notions that are entwined within policing and how the statutes and things like, the Police Officers Bill of Rights come to play. But then I also saw it from the healthcare aspect as well. When we talk about not only officer wellness and psychological exams and things of that nature, but how we are policed as a people and how that weighs on people, whether it be stress or trust or how even how medical professionals have a role in holding police officers accountable. When someone comes to the emergency room and they've been battered and bruised, and they tell the nurse on staff, he tripped over his own 2 feet, but yet he has blunt force wounds, and the only two people were there were the officer and the subject. Maybe, just maybe, our ER doctors and nurses have a responsibility to say something about that and how that works within our system. Even with gun violence data, they're doing really great work in Boston right now and other places around America, and they have been doing so for a long time, tracking gun violence incidents, right? And when we talk, I mean, obviously gun violence has been at the forefront of everyone's mind because of school shootings and such. And everyone's talking about, well, how did this happen? Where do we look at? Where are the data points? Well, the best way to find where someone was shot and where they were is probably to look at emergency room logs, right? Because if you got shot, more likely you're going to the emergency room and they got your address. So you can map all of that stuff in a way that's ascertainable, right? So for a long time, we've kind of couched these things in criminal justice reform. And said, hey, we need to obviously reform how we do policing and less police, more police, defund police. We need to reform our judiciary. We need judges that are more compassionate, and we do. We need judges that need to be more empathetic, and we need that as well. But it just doesn't just stop there. There's a large aspect of this that's really health related. So when we talk about the overall global health of our country, we have to make sure that we're using all these disciplines appropriately to get to the root causes to solve those things. Because otherwise we're just solving symptoms of issues, and that doesn't help anyone at all.
A word. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for your time. Is it Friday? Have a good weekend.
You too. Thanks for having me, June. Obviously, if you need anything, you got my contact information.
Appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody in the community appreciates it too. Thank you.
Anytime. Bye.